Are you trying to dominate your fantasy football league? Do you want so many championship rings it's impossible to sign autographs? Well, crack open a beer, pour yourself a glass of bourbon, and settle in, because you've come to the right place. Welcome to Hammercast.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of Dynasty Debates brought to you by the Hammercast Network. In honor of it being draft week, today we're going to have a special draft-themed episode with two awesome analysts in the fantasy space. We're going to be discussing which quarterback we think the San Francisco 49ers should take at number 3 overall. It's kind of a pivot point in the draft, and a lot of things kind of are contingent on who the quarterback is here. We have fellow Hammercast co-host Kevin Coleman to bang the table for Trey Lance, Christian Williams of the Cut FFB and the Debbie Royale podcast, who is Mr. Justin Fields, and that leaves me to talk about Mac Jones, probably the most likely pick here, if we're going to be honest. So the format of this debate is going to be pretty simple. Christian's going to lay out his case for Justin Fields, followed by Kevin arguing for Lance, and then I'll finish it off with Mac Jones. Then we're going to have some back and forth, and ultimately you guys get to decide who the Niners should take. Guys, you ready?
Yeah, let's
do it.
All right. Christian, Mr. Justin Fields over here, why should he be the number 3 overall pick? And this is, of course, assuming that Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are 1 and 2, so they're off the board. So why should Justin Fields be the number 3?
Well, we know my thoughts on Justin Fields. He's QB1 to me. He does a lot of things very, very well, and it's a lot of things that Jimmy G doesn't really do well. And the main thing is deep accuracy. So you look at the reason San Francisco lost the Super Bowl was because Jimmy G could not hit a wide receiver downfield. Justin Fields, it's on film, the same exact play where he actually hits his receivers in stride. You have that aspect of it where he's pinpoint accurate to all 3 levels of the field. You can say that maybe behind the line of scrimmage, he's not super accurate, but that's because he's just pulling the ball and running it for 70 yards because he's fast. So Justin Fields is kind of the mold of what you would think a Kyle Shanahan-led offense would want to be. A guy that can get out of the pocket, can make things happen, but also can work within the confines of that offense. I also think Justin Fields, we have it on film with both Fields and the guy that Kevin's going to talk about, where you see him run some play action stuff, like outside zone play action stuff, where he's turning his back to the play and then he's coming out. His footwork's awesome when he gets out of that, and he's hitting receivers intermediate to deep, really 9 times out of 10. The dude is incredibly accurate. There was a point in the 2020 season where his completion percentage was up near 90%. This dude does not miss throws. I don't understand the rhetoric behind Justin Fields, and it's not something I'm really going to get into. But Justin Fields, in my opinion, is pretty much head and shoulders above these other guys. Now, I think you can make a case for Lance. I'm sorry, man. I don't see the case for Mac Jones. I don't think a lot of people do, but yeah, that's kind of the summation. I could talk for hours about Justin Fields. We know that.
All right, fair enough. Why should it be Trey Lance?
Yeah, I mean, just to put in perspective, I don't think it should be Mac Jones. I don't mind it being Justin Fields. If it's Justin Fields, that's a great pick. I think Justin Fields can go too. We were just talking about that. And I really want to get people they talk about Lance as being a project. Can we get that lazy ass narrative out of here? He can play next year. He is not going to be I saw someone say that he needs 2 years. Okay, you need to quit because he doesn't need 2 years. He'll be all right. He can step in. He the things about him that he does good as a quarterback, and I know that I kind of beat this drum, but he's got poise. I love his arm strength, and I love his accuracy. And from the intermediate range, the deep ball, he has it. So I think that he would fit very well in that offense. At North Dakota State, a lot of play action. They ran a lot of power design runs, play action fakes. People are like, oh, well, that he's a system quarterback. In terms of his system made him look good. No, well, I mean, he You got to have this good system with a good quarterback. His decision making, I think, is key. He does the multiple reads just like Fields does. He's able to check down different options. He had the greatest athletes at North Dakota State. He doesn't have guys like Devonta Smith and Waddle and all these different guys that he had over there, even at Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, all those guys. So, yeah, you can say he played against inferior talent, but he also didn't have amazing talent around him. So when we try to bump up the numbers or down, I love his decision-making, and he's a playmaker. So if you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, I love him because he's that Konami code, as my co-host Jeff would like to talk about. But he's also kind of the guy that can make plays, decisions, and he doesn't just run. If you watch him, he doesn't run first read. He actually goes through his progressions and then he adapts. I think there's a false narrative about him just being a running guy. I had someone come on and tell me that too. And I said, well, if you watch him, he does those type of things. And I love his intangibles and his toughness. I think he'd fit well with Shanahan's system because I think anybody will fit well with Shanahan's system. I think the big thing for me is for the Niners is why would they trade up for Mac Jones? They could have traded up to 8 to 7 to the Lions and probably not given up as much draft capital. Like, are you really seriously comfortable giving up how many first-round picks they did for Mac Jones? That is where I question it. I don't necessarily hate the pick, but why would you do it at the 3rd pick?
All right, so let me bang the table a little bit here for Mac Jones. And like I said, he's probably the least popular pick of all three of these. The fans don't really seem to want him, but I don't really see why. Mac Jones, when you look at all three of these quarterbacks compared to each other, Mac Jones was by far the most accurate out of all three of them. And he might also be the least athletic of the three of them. You got the dad bod comparisons, he's not very athletic. He's kind of smaller for being, I think he's 6'2", about 215 pounds, which is not that big for a quarterback in today's NFL. But the fact that he is more of a pocket passer, I think that it's a little underappreciated for what is a starting quarterback in today's NFL. And everybody's looking for the next Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray, but those pocket passers, if they're extremely good, they do have a role in the NFL. Now, Mac Jones is a pocket passer, and he is lightning accurate, but he does have a few flaws. He did play with one of the most loaded offenses we've probably ever seen with Devonta Smith, Najee Harris, probably an offensive caliber starting O-line. But when you look at San Francisco, he's going to have all those things. And let's go look at Kyle Shanahan's history of quarterbacks. Everyone says, "Oh, he wants Justin Fields. He wants these mobile guys." But Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. Kirk Cousins, he's never Matt Ryan. None of these guys are mobile guys that are going to do a lot of damage outside the pocket. He wants a guy that's going to be extremely accurate to run his system and be able to analyze the play on a very quick basis, right? So Mac Jones, I understand that he's not the most exciting pick there because he's not the most athletic like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, but he is very, very pro-ready and he's very, very accurate. So those are his biggest pros. The argument about why would you trade up from 12 to 3, the argument is you don't know if he's going to be there at 12. There's the assumption that he's going to be there. But look at Daniel Jones from a couple years ago. Everyone said, oh, the Giants are crazy for taking him at 7 or 8 or wherever it was that he went off the board. But people wanted him further down. Everyone thought that he would make it to 15 at Washington. There was rumors about that. He did not even make it outside the top 10. So you never know how high these guys are going to go. So if you know that he's your guy, going up and getting him and locking him down, I don't think is the worst decision you can make. So that's my argument for Mac Jones. What do you guys think? Let's hear some of your let's hear you guys trash Trey Lance and Justin Fields a little bit more here.
Listen, I think Mac Jones does a lot of things well. I kind of want to echo what Kevin said, though, is you can't give up that much capital for a player that's just physically and his ceiling is just very limited, right? So he might be able to make those reads, but I can pull, 10s and 20s of examples where he can't make throws. He doesn't have a strong arm. I will say, he probably does process the field the best, but that offense was also tailored for him to have very easy processing. You've got Devonta Smith running wide open across the middle. You've got Jalen Waddle bailing you out. And I think, your point about accuracy, I think he was the most accurate, but he didn't have the best placement. So if you look at like charting numbers, I think that's where Fields and maybe Wilson. But again, that stuff's pretty subjective, and I can get behind that as well. But
Sure.
Mac Jones does fit what they've had in the past, but is that what they want? Are they gunning for something that they've had in the past? They shouldn't, because they haven't won anything.
The argument is Jimmy G took them to a Super Bowl. So if they can make it with Jimmy G, they can make it with Mac Jones. And yeah, I get it. They ran 85 plays straight. it was the running game. I get it, but still, they felt comfortable with Jimmy G taking them to a Super Bowl. So I think he'd be comfortable with Mac Jones. So again, I just lean back on what is Kyle Shanahan's prototype in quarterbacks. Who's the guy that he looks for? And the one outlier everyone goes to is RG3 back with Washington. But Kyle Shanahan had no say in any of that at the time. So, let's not give him credit for them going for RG3. I think he was just like the quarterback coach at the time. So it's not like it was his decision.
So I will say, I went back and I looked because I knew we were going to talk about this. My first ever kind of breakdown of him was week 5 last year. So Mac Jones. And here's what I said about his decision, or basically the things that I didn't necessarily like. I said when he has time in the pocket, he sets his feet. He usually has the arm strength that's needed to make throws. So when he has the time, it's there. I said the problem he runs into is the inability to make deep passes on the run or under pressure. So the one thing that I watched him, even from back then, so this is just from back then, is that he really struggles with those deep passes when he's under pressure. I don't think, and he doesn't have the ability to move. He ain't moving. He's like me back there. Like he's not doing that. But when he's able to drive his ball, it looks pretty good. It does tail off. It does lose velocity though. And I think that worries me at the NFL, especially at that next level where you're like, hey, if that tails off against Ole Miss, that's fine, but not against these NFL guys, especially in that conference. If he's going to go to the San Francisco, he's going to be playing against some tough defenses. So I think that for me, it just seems like he's a system dependent guy, and maybe he has found a right system. Like maybe that is the system that you have it there. But I agree. Like if I'm going to go against Trey, the one thing I would say is his mechanics need a little bit of work for sure. I think it looked like at the pro day they had were working on it with him, but he does tend to kind of flail out, especially when he's on the run. His mechanics can break down. His release gets a little wonky too when he gets a little pressured. So when you're watching Lance, there are some things that he can definitely work on. But I always come back to this analogy, and it's a baseball analogy, so don't kill me out here. But if you have two guys that run to first base at the same time, one guy has bad form and one guy has proper form, you're going to take the bad form kid because you can make it run faster. That's what I see with both those guys. Jones is going to run fine. He's fine. But those other two guys have that ability to you can teach them, hey, okay, this is how you do this, especially with Shanahan. And that elevates their game, right? And that elevates their ceiling. But I understand the argument. I can't see them being dumb enough I don't want to be dumb enough. That's a bad word. I don't want my Mac Jones fans out there to get mad at me. But I cannot see them giving up all that capital for Mac Jones. If it happens, then God, I will eat crow. Like I will eat crow. But it's crazy to me. I
gotta say, the biggest thing against Lance, and I know the easy thing is to harp on why Mac Jones shouldn't be the pick, but when it comes to Trey Lance, right? You touched on it a little bit in your argument, but there is a little bit of risk with Trey Lance compared to even Mac Jones or Justin Fields. And the reason why is because he's not in a very competitive conference, first off. I mean, Mac Jones was in the most competitive. It's the SEC, the biggest name schools. But Trey Lance also had a very limited number of total games played, right? I think he had half the number of total even passing attempts as the other two. I'm not saying that is a necessary knock on him, but it is something that you have to look at with a little bit of a skepticism, and you have to kind of be a little worried that he's not going to translate to the NFL. So that's my anti-Trey Lance take here. So
go ahead, Christian.
I was just going to say, let's also hear an anti-Justin Fields, and I can bring one up because I think what might deter Kyle Shanahan from wanting Justin Fields is that hero ball nature where he just will not get rid of the ball until something opens up or he tries to scramble around. That's not at all Kyle Shanahan. And so I understand that argument too, where if Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to watch his quarterback take a ton of sacks, and he might not like Justin Fields at all. In terms of what you said about Lance, I think he's going to translate, but that's also just based on the tools that he has. We really don't have a good path for him because we haven't seen too many quarterbacks that have. Well, first of all, he hasn't really played much football in the last year, so that's where you kind of wonder: is he going to be rusty? I agree with Kevin though. I think Trey Lance can start probably week 1 and be okay.
I don't take it as I don't think he's going to translate, but if I was kind of Kyle Shanahan and the Niners, that is something that I have to take into account, right? And the same thing with Fields. I agree with you that he does do a little bit of the hero ball. And one thing that always stuck out to me that we heard a couple years ago, that coaches like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, they want somebody that they can just teach their system. Matt LaFleur with Green Bay was the perfect example. When he first went over to Green Bay, right, he wanted Aaron Rodgers to adopt his system, didn't really want him to think outside the box. Here's option A, option B, go do it, right? And that's, like you said with Justin Fields, he does do that hero ball. He kind of does create on his own a little bit there. And that could be something that pushes him away from Kyle Shanahan, because Kyle Shanahan wants a guy that's just going to go, here's what I tell you, go do it, right? So it is a little bit something. It's a great thing depending on who your coach is, but that could be what pushes him down on their draft board.
Yeah, I guess. I just think that with that talent that's there, and I think Fields seems always like, I don't understand the knock about Fields. I mean, about like his personality and the way he plays. Listen, as a Michigan guy, I've watched him because I've watched him now, and he balls. He's just a guy that plays hard. I don't know how you can't root for the kid. I don't understand the narrative that we hear about that. Apparently he plays baseball, and that's a bad thing. But like you're wondering, but Kyler Murray was a bad thing. But you worry about all this stuff, and you're like, I think it's crap. I think that really this pick needs to come down to Fields or Lance. I think that's what it's going to come down to. What Shanahan does with that, I don't know. I'm not Shanahan, obviously. I'm just a high school history teacher. But I think that when you're looking at both those guys, I don't know how I'd rather tie myself to one of those two dudes and say, we're going to try to win with you because you have the highest ceiling, than go to Mac Jones and make the wild card and lose. That's just my argument.
Can I throw in just one teensy little curveball? So what if Justin Fields goes to, I know we said that we're assuming that Zach Wilson goes to, what if Justin Fields goes to, do you think that Zach Wilson is the pick for the 49ers?
Oh, yes, 100%. So everyone talked about that at first, right? Like when the Mac Jones rumors first came out, everyone talked about how, this is just a smoke screen to get the Jets to drop on Zach Wilson and all this stuff and go on Mac Jones. And I don't think that the Jets are ever going to take Mac Jones. They're going to take either Justin Fields or they're going to take Zach Wilson. And if Zach Wilson falls to 3, I think that he's more of a Kyle Shanahan guy even than Mac Jones, in my opinion. So I think that would be a wild turn of events, but crazier things have happened. I will say, back when the actual before the picks were all set and everything, I always thought the Jets were going to go Fields number 2, and then the Zach Wilson kind of love really kind of appeared out of nowhere. The Fields, he basically disappeared from the discussion without anybody noticing, So. Oh,
I noticed.
Yeah, I don't know where these Wilson guys came from. Like I do Debbie, and I've been around this stuff for a while. Everybody's always liked Wilson, but it was always Fields, Lawrence, 1-2.
Right.
And I don't understand where, I don't know. That's why I question whether or not he will go to, because the narrative is like, of course the NFL team, it's locked to the Jets. But I haven't heard anybody really say that. Do they really know? Like
I listened to Matt Miller, the draft scout, NFL draft scout, and his podcast. He basically was at Zach Wilson's pro day, and he was talking to the GM, Joe Douglas, and without confirming it, it's basically locked at the pick from what he said. So I trust his sources. He's pretty good at that kind of stuff.
Well, that's fair. I just don't trust the Jets. So you can take him if you want, but I think these other two guys, I would rather have Fields at 2. That's my personal opinion.
Same.
So
but
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but I honestly, I think that's more of a coin flip than people are leading to believe. I think a few like big name draft guys, draft analysts, went all in on Wilson being QB2, and then it just took off from there. Snowball effect.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty good case for all three of these guys. Like I said, athletically, your two guys blow my guy out of the water. You can't do the dad bod shuffle and expect to be the favorite pick over here. But when it comes to Kyle Shanahan mold, I do think that Mac Jones is someone that is going to fit his style a little bit better, maybe than these other two. But again, you guys made some very good points on why they should be the picks. Athletically, ceiling-wise, talent-wise, for sure. They definitely blow my guy out of the water. So here in the next couple of days, it's going to be a crazy, crazy week with the draft coming up. What are you guys going to be doing for content here that people can find you guys, and what should they expect from you guys this week?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, you can find us, me and Christian and Jeff. We are doing our Debbie Royale podcast on Tuesday, so you can hit us live on Twitter and YouTube and all the special places at thegoingfor2.com. We're doing a draft day special, betting lines, everything like that. And then I'm joining a bunch of live streams and stuff during it. I don't even know how many I'm joining. I've been invited, and I'm going to pop on. But I'm just excited to get this thing done because the hot take season is killing me. I'm dying inside.
Yes, and so obviously, yes, the Debbie Royale on Tuesday nights at 9:30. It's going to be a pretty constant thing. We just debuted last week. Kevin and Jeff are great. And we'll be doing those betting things like he said, but then we also at the Cut have a live stream for the draft. We'll also have like a bold predictions, kind of like scenario based questions episode coming out Tuesday. I've got a couple mocks coming out. Just a lot. It's going to be a busy week for sure. I think I'm going on a couple live streams too. I'm hopping out of my own and hopping into some other ones. So it'll be fun.
There you go. All right. Last question before we cut this thing down. Who are your favorite teams, and who are you hoping that they take in the draft?
Oh, well, I got the Cowboys, and if they don't take a cornerback or a tackle, I am going to cry inside. If they take a linebacker or an edge rusher, I will quit being a fan.
I'm hoping that they go offensive line so we just have no defensive in the top 10 just for that crazy stat. That was insane to me. But what about you, Christian?
I'm a Browns fan, and I'm pretty torn, but I think I want them to take Rashad Bateman, which isn't like what normal Browns fans say. But
would you have them trade Odell then, or would you have them keep him?
Well, Odell and Jarvis are both like on the outs after this year. I think they have like pretty clean breaks in their contract, so it'd be more of like a future move. Keep all three of them for this year. I was
going to say, Odell, I think they can move right now for no dead cap, but I don't know if they would. But
Probably not. Probably not.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on with me. This was a great conversation. You guys have been killing it in the fantasy community lately, so go follow these guys. You can see their Twitter handles right here. They are going to be able to get you a lot of great information, especially for the Devi community. If you guys are new to that, go check these guys out. They always have good takes. So thank you guys for coming on. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the video down below. Help us out with that algorithm. Just push the video up a little bit higher. Thank you guys for listening, and have a good night.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com. Subscribe and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.